Hey, welcome back. My name is Patrick Nolan. I'm an attorney licensed in the state of Missouri. This is Pat Talks Law. This is Windshield Time, 19.03 is the episode. Windshield Time is ad hoc. It's just me talking while I'm driving between courts. It is usually focused on law and focused on my perception, my takes on it. There may be some inaccuracies, there may be some cursing, there may be some vulgarity. I'm not reading from a script, I'm not reading from a book. So, you know, if I make a mistake, I'm positive the YouTube community is going to let me know in the comments. I am going to ask you right now, because I always forget at the end, hit like, subscribe, hit the alert button if that's what you're into, and let me know if you have any comments, suggestions. Tell us what you think. This episode, I'm going to talk about a couple of things that have been weighing on my mind this week. First, the inherent problems we have with our legal system. We have problems with socioeconomic classes, summed up with the humorous statement stolen from P.J. O'Rourke and from the comic book creator Wizard of Id: every man is innocent until proven broke. However, there's a secondary one, and we've all heard that, you know, there is a bias in our court system, in our justice system, against African Americans. That is true. There is. Problem is that it's insidious. It's a deep bias, not an overt bias. If it was an overt, simple bias, we could point, we would say, that cop's a racist, he needs to go. That judge is a racist, he needs to go. That prosecutor's a racist, he needs to go. And it isn't that simple. And it may be for, you know, a few scattered people. In any pool of people, there's going to be some. But statistically, it's not that simple. Statistically, we have biases, and they're shown in statistics, even though we can pull individual cases out, look at them and say, well, everything was done right in this case, so I don't know why that contributes to that. And that's one of the problems we have. So as far as the racial bias, let's first talk about the case of Curtis Flowers. Curtis Flowers is back in the United States Supreme Court. Oral arguments took place this week. Justice Thomas broke his historic 3-year silence to ask questions in this case. And this is a case where Mr. Flowers is facing the death penalty. He was tried, convicted, and sentenced to death. So the man is on death row, and he will be killed if he is unsuccessful in his appeals. That makes this one of the more serious issues that courts can face. The argument is racism. The prosecutor excluded all potential black jurors from the jury. In excluding the black jurors from the jury, the prosecutor may have committed what's called a Batson violation. Batson is a case where it says you can't exclude a juror on the basis of race, sex, gender, or prohibited categories. Now, what makes this case unique is he was tried for this case 6 times. 6. The previous 5 times, previous 5 convictions were overturned for prosecutorial misconduct. That's the prosecutor broke the law to get a conviction. The prosecutor did something wrong to get a conviction. The man has been in prison, in custody, for more than 20 years, and they still don't have a valid conviction against him. This is the worst of our criminal justice system right there. It's appalling, And a lot of people would shrug their shoulders and say, well, it's Mississippi, we expect them to be racist. No, we don't. We don't. We don't expect anybody to be racist. First. Second, surprisingly, a lot of the South has made great strides in racial issues. So, Mr. Flowers is back. Now, I think most people watching agree that the court is going to overturn his conviction. The question is, what do they do now? Do they send the case back, remand it back for a new trial? Gosh, man, I don't know. He's been tried 6 times. Is there any reason to believe that they're not gonna screw up the prosecution again? He's been in custody for more than 20 years. This is why we have a double jeopardy clause. Okay? So that the prosecution can't try you again and again and again and again until they get the verdict they want. The problem is that they screwed it up. And the problem is that the recourse the court has is somewhat limited. What do they do? Can the court release him and not remand it for a new trial? I don't think so. I think the court's hands are somewhat tied. It's going to have to go back to Mississippi. And do they try it again? Well, the prosecutor in Mississippi is going to have to make a decision. The citizens of Mississippi are going to have to make a decision as far regards to that prosecutor. So, I don't know. I don't know what will ultimately happen with that. I think that the conviction will be overturned. But it is quite possibly, I mean, it's horrible. It's a horrible situation. And I'm using it as a springboard to talk about inherent racism throughout our legal system. Because we have an inherent racism. From law enforcement officers on the street, decisions about policing, where policing is going to happen, where officers are positioned and how they're placed, up through juries and sentencing, there is an inherent bias against black people. I'm not saying that any individual prosecutor, any individual judge, or any individual cop is a racist, although there are individuals that are. Statistically, even amongst where we would think that people are not, we show a bias against black people. So the question is, why? Why does that exist? And what can we do about it? My background is media. I came up as a reporter. I got a master's in mass communication from University of Central Missouri. Go Mules. And one of the things that I studied while I was there was media effects. And specifically, George Gerbner's cultivation theory. Cultivation theory tells us that people who are heavy consumers of television see the world as a more violent, dangerous place than people who are light consumers of television. Now, these studies have been expanded to sexual behaviors. People who are heavy consumers tend to see the world more sexually than people who are light consumers. People who are heavy consumers think more people are having sex more often than they are. People who are heavy consumers think that there's more sexual assault and rape than there is. People who are heavy consumers that tend to see the world in a more dangerous and negative light than light consumers of television. That creates a deep bias, not a conscious bias, but it changes a person's view of the world. And the problem when it comes to race is that is a very, very subtle bias that most people will claim they don't have. It's very hard to acknowledge that you have a bias. But it's there. And I think it's unavoidable in our culture. And quite frankly, I think African Americans in our culture have the same bias. Even though they don't want to acknowledge that either. Because it's part of the shaping of our society. Okay? And deep-seatedly, media cultivates our perception of the world. Cultivation theory. We're dumbing this down as far as we can go because I know you don't want a master's class in mass communication. So what does that mean? That means that the officer who may have nothing but good in his heart as a result of growing up in our society will have a very small bias somewhere inside. How does that reflect itself on the street? Well, does he make a slight variation in his approach to a traffic stop for a black driver as opposed to a white driver? Does he change the way he parks his car? When he gets out, does he loosen up his firearm in case it's needed? When he walks up to the window, is he a little bit more gruff, a little bit more hesitant than he would have been with a white driver? Just a little. The slightest bit is enough to change that encounter. And even though that encounter may still end the same way, it may still have gone largely the same way as it would have with a white driver, statistically, those encounters build. Okay? So when that driver, that black person is stopped or talking with his friends and they exchange their stories, then they're stopped again. Another person has heard the stories, black or white, police officer, black driver, white police officer, black driver, black police officer, white driver, black police officer. Works that way too, folks. They might be just a little bit more on edge, and that can lead to a different result. That can lead to a ticket where a warning might have been given. That can lead to a search where a ticket might have just been given. Search may lead to something else. Now, there are other factors that are involved. Clearly, there are. Okay? The fact that African American communities are policed more heavily than white communities. The fact that socioeconomic status has a huge role in it. Poor black communities are policed heavier than affluent white communities. You're going to have different numbers. There's a lot that goes into it. And the question truly comes down to is, where do these problems stem from? And again, it's not all stemming from race. It's not all stemming from cultivation of, distrust through media. There's poverty is a huge aspect to it. But the point I'm getting at isn't that I have a solution or even a perfect explanation. It's we have to acknowledge that there is a problem before we can go any farther. And there is a problem. In our society, in Missouri, we have a problem with racism inherent in our legal system. We have a problem with socioeconomic status. Missouri has made progress on the socioeconomic status. We have new bond conditions requiring people to be released unless the state proves that they're a danger to the community. We'll see how judges handle that. I'm not too hopeful that judges are going to embrace the dedication to the Constitution that the Missouri Supreme Court has engaged in. I think that we're still going to get far too many people held in custody, but it is progress, and that's good. The Missouri's recent case regarding board bills and not bringing people back in and throwing them in jail for an unpaid board bill. Again, phenomenal progress. One of the biggest insidious issues is poverty in courts. When you have a lower income person and they are thrown in jail pending a criminal charge, what happens? They don't have the money to post bond, so they have to sit in jail. That is an inherent inequality in our system. I can post bond and get out. If I was arrested and charged with something, I can put up the 1,000, 5,000, and I'm certain that we would be able to come up with bond money and get me out. Even release on my own recognizance. I am an upper middle class professional white guy. I've got better odds getting released on my own recognizance than the poor person. I'm going to a house, I'm going to a good neighborhood, they're going back to, the bad part of town. They're going, it's a completely different result. But we know that you are far statistically more likely to plead guilty to a crime if you are in custody. People plead guilty to get out of jail. People lie and plead guilty because they want to get out of jail. A week in jail for someone who's living paycheck to paycheck means they can lose their house, they can lose their car, they lose their job, they lose everything. Their kids get taken away because they're homeless. Yeah, that's not supposed to happen either. It does. That's the reality of our situation. What can we do about that? Well, in Missouri right now, we've made progress largely because the Public Defender's Office got an increase in funding. They are still not funded properly. The Missouri State Public Defender's Office needs more money. Gotta have it. They handle most of the criminal cases in Missouri. They need more money. They need the resources to be able to defend the rights of the accused. Because, quite frankly, if we don't defend the accused, then there's no such thing as a difference between guilty or innocent. That's a topic for another day because I'm getting ready to get back into town. I know I got a lot of work coming up. But Curtis Flowers, inherent racism in our society. Watch that Supreme Court case. You will find it in the news if you just Google Curtis Flowers, Mississippi, and you can read about it. It's a phenomenally interesting case. Also, go ahead and take a look at the statistics regarding our poverty and criminal outcomes and race and criminal outcomes. It's horrible. It's big picture. Thank you all for coming along. Like, subscribe. I did remember. And I will talk to you soon. Oh yeah, before we go, there are some videos I've promised. We're going to make them. I'll be dropping videos starting this weekend on the 4 new medical marijuana draft rules that DHSS has proposed. They are content dense and dry. If you're interested in it, you might be interested in a longer video, but I'm also going to do a short summary of each one, a 4 or 5 minute, and then the longer, this is it. So that's coming down. I'm also working up a video that was requested on Missouri's 2 proposed new gun laws in the state Senate and the state House, the bills that are up. That's an interesting topic in and of itself. But anyway, thank you for watching, and I will talk to you again soon.